Kristin Coulter, Owen's mom.
And I'm Darin Coulter, Owen's dad.
And we want to thank all of you for inviting us to join you today virtually to share Owen's miracle story. We also want to take the opportunity to thank so many people in our community that stepped up to be so supportive and show so much care and love during his time. Journey actually started a couple years ago when our daughter Madeline, 7 years of age at that time, became very, very ill. She had a few days of very high fevers, started to break out with rashes on her body, and something just wasn't right. So Darin decided to take her to Dell Children's Hospital.
When we were there, that's when she was diagnosed with Kawasaki's disease. And luckily we had the great doctors at Dell Children's that realized the symptoms and understood what was going on and treated her effectively with the IVIG.
Thankfully, it was caught within this 10-day window, and Madeline had no heart aneurysms, and since then has had clear echocardiograms and clear EKGs, and we're just so glad that her recovery has been smooth with no hiccups, and just so thankful for all the research that continues. Just 1 year later, in the month of December, we would end up back at Dell Children's Hospital, but this time it was with our son, Owen. Owen had been experiencing some symptoms that Darin and I just really couldn't put our finger on, and so we took him to his primary care physician to help us kind of maybe rule out flu or strep. Those tests came back negative, so we were told to just bring Owen home, watch and monitor him, make sure he was hydrated and drinking lots of water, and that if any new symptoms presented themselves, to call them back or bring them back first thing in the morning.
And that night, we put Owen to bed, but I slept in his room with him, and he was experiencing a really bad headache. And along with that, he was experiencing pain in his arms and legs that was just very uncomfortable for him, so he didn't really get much sleep that night. He also complained that he was really hot, and when I would touch him, he'd be almost ice cold. And then when we got up in the morning, that's when we really saw what was going on.
That morning, Darin and I didn't sleep at all. Obviously, we were really worried about Owen and just really in tune with trying to figure out what was going on. We pulled back his blanket that was on top of him, and at that point we saw that his ankles had a purplish tint. That was our point where we said we've got to take him to Dell Children's, and we loaded him up and we headed down to Dell Children's. On our way down there, he started to look a lot worse, and at one point he threw up in the back of the truck.
So we got him into the ER, and the doctors and nurses assessed him, started taking vitals. At that time, the doctor really saw how sick Owen was getting and decided we needed to really transport to Dell at that time.
We could just feel it in the room that something was not right, and they knew just how sick Owen was.
The critical care nurse, he tried to get a line in Owen, was unsuccessful, and he, quick thinking, put one in his jugular. Once that was in, we were on our way. We loaded up and started heading down to Dell.
During the entire transport time, I just kept talking to Owen. There was even at some points he would talk back and he would say, "Mommy, I'm so thirsty. I need water." And I just kept telling him that as soon as we got to the hospital, we'd get him some cold ice water. He would then fade out, and then I would talk to him again, hold his hand, try to start conversation, and that was sort of the rhythm until we got to the hospital. So we got to the hospital. At that point, they got him shifted to a bed and started doing more assessments. Still, his body temperature was only 95 degrees. So at that point, they started to put warm blankets on Owen.
At that point, he was telling us that he really had to go to the bathroom. So we're just saying, you know what, just go right there. And at that time, he went unconscious, and we looked up and it was just flatline. You know, he had gone into cardiac arrest. Being a first responder, I'm not used to having that interaction with my family being on that side of the coin. My son is in cardiac arrest, and the nurses just started doing a great job of getting on chest compressions right away. I just held Owen's hand and just told him to hang in there and keep fighting. The nurses and doctors in there just did an absolute great job.
Social workers were asking to reach out to family members, friends, and our church family at this point. Slowly, folks started to arrive, and all I could do in that moment was get on my hands and knees and pray. And I prayed that God would save Owen. I prayed that he'd heal him. I was praying for the doctors and nurses in that room. And I was praying for Darin to have strength watching all of it go on in that room. And I was yelling out his name. I was telling him that I loved him. I was yelling that he would continue to fight and stay strong.
With me in there holding Owen's hand and Kristin out there, just, you can hear her out there. I think that's what really kept the doctors and nurses going. And that's why they pushed, 8 rounds of epi when they usually stop at 3. We'd get pulses and we'd look up at the monitor, and I remember one time it said, 124, strong and regular, and I was like, oh man, all right, buddy, you got this, come back. And then we'd stop compressions and you just watch the heart rate just go down. It hits an hour. And the doctor and I look at each other and he just looks at me and says, you know what, hey, we have this machine, it's called an ECMO. It's basically a Hail Mary, but it's kind of all we got. What do you think? And I said, man, if that's all we got, let's do it. Let's not give up on this. Everybody got sterile in there. It's turned into OR. To hook up the ECMO machine, you have to cut into the jugular and the artery in his neck to insert a catheter so you can hook the machine up. But the amazing part was the doctor that was doing this all while Owen was getting compressions.
We just continued to have hope and faith that they were going to be able to successfully put this ECMO machine on Owen. And earlier that day, another patient that was on standby for ECMO happened to not need it. And so that entire ECMO team was there that day, and they were able to come and put that ECMO machine on Owen. So it was that in itself was probably one of the first kind of miracle moments that we were celebrating.
What they wanted to do next was transport him down to the PICU.
Yeah, I remember I was pretty weak at that point, just emotionally, physically, and so they had put me in a wheelchair and they were pushing me behind a entourage, literally of about, I would say 20, maybe 25 hospital staff, slowly moving Owen along with this huge ECMO machine down these hallways to get to the PICU unit. And we ended up at the very end of the hallway, which was exactly the same room that Malin was in just 1 year prior. But I just knew that if Malin walked out of that room healed, something good was gonna come out of that room. Being on ECMO, he was also hooked up to a ventilator, so he was completely paralyzed. He had the ventilator breathing for him. He had the ECMO machine. During that time, after some CAT scans, we noticed some stroke signs, and we also noticed at one point he had a blood pool in his brain. It was a rocky 5 days, I would say, experiencing what I would say is, in some instances, a parent's worst nightmare, but in other instances, like just feeling so loved by God and by our friends and our family, and knowing that we had people alongside us that were gonna push through this next kind of phase of his journey.
What's so great about this machine is just the resting portion that it allows the heart to do, just allows the heart to get stronger and stronger. Mm-hmm. And this is exactly what happened with Owen. The next few days, his heart started to get stronger and stronger, and it was very noticeable. So they were able to turn the machine down. so that it wasn't helping him as much, and as his heart was doing more of the work each day. And then remembered at this time, he still had kidney failure. He had at least 2 strokes that we know of. He was still in respiratory failure. And during this time, they didn't know what his brain activity was going to be, just because of the length of CPR and how much he got. So that we were very worried, just in that sense of how Owen would be coming out of this.
Yeah. So then on day 5, they came to us and said, let's go ahead and wean him off this ECMO and see if we can remove him completely off of it. And thankfully, gosh, we were waited for, I think, 6-7 hours while they performed the surgery. But I still remember the day when the nurse came walking down the hall and said, he's off of it. So it was really,
Super excited.
it was a beautiful moment for sure. And then we just, a lot of it was just continuous care for him based on the fact that he was on kidney dialysis. He was still, hooked to a ventilator, breathing for him. It was a lot of watching and waiting back and forth. And I think at that point, we were also in a state of just the uncertainty of his cognitive damage. And so I still remember the day when one of the doctors pulled us aside, and in hopes of pulling him off the ventilator, they wanted to kind of lay out the different cognitive situations that we may need to prepare ourselves for. And would he know us? Would he ever be able to communicate with us? Would he recognize us? Would he be hooked up to, a ventilator for life? There was just so many unknowns. And so that led us into Christmas Eve. They had been noticing that Owen was breathing over the ventilator, and for a few days at that point. And so they said, hey, Darin and Kristin, let's go ahead and let's see if he can breathe on his own without the ventilator.
And so that day I was in the room with him, and said, hey Dad, you ready to take this tube out? And excitedly I said, yeah. But I was also nervous too, what's going to happen after this. So they said, okay. They shut off the ventilator and watched him for a second, and he was still breathing perfectly. And they said, here we go. And we pulled out the tube. And the greatest thing that I can remember was when Owen looked up at me and said, when is Mommy going to be here? And I knew at that point that we had our own back. Just saying that meant the world to me.
This few days was really just a lot of celebrating. We celebrated Christmas. At this point, Owen was being weaned off all of the heavy narcotics, so he was still pretty loopy. But it was also that transition time where we were starting to begin to introduce him to all the different therapies in the rehab unit. So we started to see the physical therapist, the occupational therapist, the speech and language therapist, because he was going to have to relearn how to swallow and eat and talk and crawl and walk. And so we knew we had a long journey ahead, but we were ready for it. We were ready to be right by his side, and however long it took. So in January, we were transitioned to the rehab unit, which was a big celebration. I still remember all of the PICU nurses and doctors lined up with bubbles blowing, and it was a big party. It was a really neat celebration of him stepping out of that ICU critical care state and into a much more, I would say, normal state of life in the rehab unit. And then we spent the next 30 days in rehab. During the month that we were in rehab, it was a full-time job for Owen and for Darin and I. There was obvious stroke impact on Owen's left side. In fact, it was immobile for many days and even maybe a couple weeks. So there was a lot of therapy needed during that time. He was going 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and we were all just rallying and committed to helping him get into a state where we could get home, because we knew we wanted to bring Owen home. But during this whole time, we were so blessed to have continuous visitors at the hospital, support, food being brought in by Austin Fire and Concordia, and just our church family celebration. And it was just talk about having courage and community. We had that. We had a lot of hope and faith, knowing that there were so many people kind of rallying behind Owen, and people praying for him and our family. And it was a huge celebration the day that we got to go home. It was day 57, and we decided that he was gonna be discharged superhero like. And so we had lots of firefighters, we had superheroes show up to the party, all of his nurses and doctors, and it was a huge celebration of how he fought this battle, and he won, and he was our superhero.
Our family knows firsthand how the American Heart Association is making a difference in this community.
The life-saving support is only possible because of generous supporters just like you. So now, more than ever, is the time we would encourage you guys to consider donating with a gift or with your time to support the work that American Heart Association is doing to protect hearts and to save hearts just like Owen's. This is our beautiful family. I'm actually going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves to you.
Hi, my name is Madeline, and I'm 10 years old. Hi, my name is Hudson, and I'm 6 years old. Hi, my name is Owen, and I'm 6 years old.
And
we are the Coulter family!